Thank you. I went to visit Adam at the church he goes to in Albuquerque. And before the class, they had a timer there, a countdown timer. And as soon as it got to 0, the guy got up there and started teaching. So one of the congregations I said, I notice you always start on time. I think that's very impressive. He says, well, if we start late, that gives the people the idea it's okay to show up late. Yeah. So, isn't that true? All right, if I move that up. I think Alex has a public service announcement from the back. He's going to teach the class from the back.
No, nothing like that. Thanks, Warder. It's a balmy 58 degrees with no cloud in the building. We've got this mic back here for those who might like to make a comment. So if you feel an urge, just raise your hand and I'll come over and hand the mic to you, and we'll get Warner's attention, and hopefully we'll get more feedback and more interplay.
Yeah, nothing like, the speaker's tie is ugly or something like that.
Well, if that's on your heart, you go right.
Okay. All right.
Quit talking about me.
All right. Let's see. This works. It's on. All right. Sacred gifts and holy gatherings will be the class for winter quarter, which includes December, January, and February. So if you're wondering, well, what are these sacred gifts and holy gatherings? Well, I think it's appropriate time for this class because isn't December really the month when we have a lot of gift giving? We give gifts to our loved ones and we receive gifts. So the way ahead for the month of December, this class is in 3 parts, one for each month. For December, we're going to have gifts to honor God, what we can do to honor God. And the first of these will be keeping the Sabbath. Now, we had a little bit of this last quarter when we studied Exodus. So we'll call that Sabbath 101. We're going to call this Sabbath 201 for sophomores, okay? Then acceptable gifts. Those are those offerings, those sacrifices that Alex talked about last week. And they're in the book of Leviticus, and there's 5 of them that are mentioned. If you see here, we're going to be going through about 9 different books of the Bible in this class. And then dedication of the firstborn. It was no accident that when Mary and Joseph and Jesus came to the temple, that there they saw Anna and Simeon. It was in Scripture that they would be there at that time, specifically when Jesus was 40 days old. And then a generous gift from Matthew and Mark. Can a poor person give generously, in fact, more generously than a rich person? Part 2 is in January, and then we'll have 4 weddings and a funeral in that month. A bride worth waiting for, Rachel. And then the most beautiful bride, Song of Solomon. I've never taught a class from Song of Solomon. Gordon, have you ever taught from Song of Solomon or sermon?
Not in a long while.
So yeah, that's a book. It's really a beautiful book. If you haven't read it in a while, this is a book that most of us read when we are reading through the Bible in 1 year. And that also applies to Hosea. Some of us may know Hosea. This is when God tells his prophet, I want you to marry a harlot and have children with her. And then the last 2 are familiar, a wedding in Cana, which really has nothing to do with the bride and groom. They're almost irrelevant in that story. And then the death of a friend. We have a funeral in Bethany. And John 11, you probably know what that deals with. And then finally, the holy gatherings, the 3 feasts that the people were to come for. The Passover feast, Feast of Weeks, known better to us by the Greek name Pentecost, and the Feast of Booths, and then Day of Atonement. That's just 1 day. It's a somber day, and that's very close to the time frame of the Feast of Weeks. Okay, so this class is keeping the Sabbath. Keeping the Sabbath. So just off the top of your head, what comes to mind when I say the word Sabbath? What? Saturday?
Sunday school.
Sunday school? Anything else? And how is it kept? How is it observed? Okay, Sabbath definition, the word Sabbath, Shabbat, refers to a day of rest. A day of rest, doesn't have to be Saturday. It means to cease, to rest, complete rest, or desist. And this word is found in every section of the Bible. By that I mean the law, the prophets, and the writings. The root would be the word Shabbat, or Shabbat, and it just means cease, desist, or rest. And then we have Shabbat. It's a day to cease, desist, or rest. And God set the example for this early on in Genesis by resting after completing creation in 6 days. And then on the 7th day, he rested. So, elementary, what is a day? 24 hours? Well, there's actually 2 definitions. It's Genesis 1:5, right there at the beginning. God called the light day, daylight. And the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day. So we have day with capital D and day with lowercase d. The ESV, other versions have them in quotes, the first day. So it's both the same Hebrew word, yom, but 2 different meanings there. And then here's the creation, all there together, evening and morning, 2nd day, 3rd day, 4th day, and 5th day. And then on the 6th day, God had completed everything, nothing else to do, so he rested. God rested. You say, well, that's good since he had Jesus doing all the work, right? According to John 1:1 or John 1:3. But God rested. But God was involved in it. Jesus was involved in it. And it talks about the Spirit hovering over the face of the water. So I think they were all involved. But a day, we have a day here, consisted of evening and morning. So this sets the precedent. So why did the Jews start their day in the evening rather than in the morning? So we have day as in daylight, and then we have first day. The day is a period of time covering from sunset on one day till sunset on the next day, or as we say, it's about 24 hours. Now, about the first mentions of the word here, Shabbat, which means cease or rest. And it's here, right here in Genesis. We have a lot of repeated words here. We see seventh. We think of seventh when we think of Sabbath. And then we also have some other repeated words. In verses 2 and 3, seventh is found 3 times. And then all the work that he had done was repeated 3 times. And then we have the word rested, and it's repeated twice. And then the word for seventh is not Sabbath, but it's Shaveh. And the word for rested is Shavat. Shaveh, Shavat, Shemiel, Shemazel. So what? They sound alike, don't they? So, did God really rest? No, he ceased work. Did God forget to set the alarm clock, rub some Bengay on those muscles, dip his feet in Epsom salt? No, he could have gone on. All that means is he stopped working, he ceased working because he was finished. No more to create. Now, the first mention after that is with Noah. This is after the flood. While the earth remains, from now on, there'll be seed time, harvest time, cold, heat, summer, winter, day and night, shall not cease, shall not Shabbat. No rest. That'll continue. Sun will rise, sun will set. Then we go to Exodus, the passages we studied last week. Moses and Aaron are going to Pharaoh. And they said, we need to go out. We need to have a day off, to go out and worship God so that pestilence will not follow on him. But then the king said to him, I can just picture Yul Brenner saying this, Moses, Moses, Moses. Why do you want to take the people away from their work? Get back to your work. Get back to your burdens. And Pharaoh said, behold, the people of the land are now many. There's lots of you to do the work. And you make them rest from their burdens. You make them want to have a Sabbath from your burdens. Remember this. Pharaoh refused to give the people a Sabbath. In fact, what did he do? He increased their work. They weren't happy. Now you got to go out and get that straw yourself.
He didn't let them unionize.
Yeah, he kept them busy. And then we go back to the gathering of the manna. We remember they were to do this every day. They couldn't just get a big bucket for this manna because it'll go bad. So they had to go every morning and out and do that. And God tested them here. This was a test. He said, on the 6 days, you go get enough for the day, but on that 6th day, get twice the amount. Well, they said, why? It's going to go bad. But he says, no, tomorrow it's going to be good. The Lord commanded, tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath. Exodus 16:23. This is the first mention of Sabbath in the Bible. So bake what you will bake, boil what you will, and any that was left over, lay aside and then keep it until the morning. So do this, bake everything on the 6th day, and then keep it till the next morning, because on the 7th day, it's still going to be good. Trust me, it's still going to be good. So they laid it aside till morning as Moses commanded, and it did not stink. So the Lord was right. You know, we can keep twice the amount on that one day. Today you will not find, so eat it today, for today is the Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. That's on that 7th day. 6 days you'll gather it, but not on the Sabbath day, which is the Sabbath. There will be none out there. But on the 7th day, some of the people didn't get the message, didn't they? They went out and they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? This was a commandment and this was a law. But look where we are, Exodus chapter 16. Moses hadn't gone up on the mountain yet. There's no stone tablets. So even before they had the stone tablets, this was still a commandment and a law. It was orally given. See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the 6th day, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place. Let no one go out of his place on the 7th day. So the people, Shabbat on the 7th day. Now, there's some talk, what is his place? Does that mean your house or just your property around your house? You can do things. Some say even you can do mundane things. If you got a cow or you got a goat that needs to be milked on the Sabbath day, you can go out and do that. You know, things like that you can do. A baby's born, a midwife can work. A circumcision still happens on the Sabbath, and priests still work on the Sabbath. Okay. Am I pushing? What did I do? Try the off and on approach. No, I think I had it set for a time. Somehow a timer came on. So let's look at the 10 Commandments, or the 10 words. Sabbath commandment is commandment number 4. That you should know, familiar with this. Remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work on those 6 days. But on the 7th day, it's a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any of your work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant, female servant, your livestock or sojourner who is within your gates. So don't do any work. You shall not do, you or your son. Now the word here, you, is second person singular masculine. So does that mean only the man doesn't do any work? Do you see wife listed there? So you or your son or your daughter or your male, but good news, your wife can still work, right? That's why they say women's work is never done. But no, scholars agree that the you includes both male and female head of household. You shall not kill man and woman. You shall not covet your neighbor's husband. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Just because you shall not covet your neighbor's husband isn't there, it still applies. Now, why? Why? For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and made it holy. And that's directly from Genesis 2:3. So it gives the reason why you need to rest on that seventh day, because I rested on the seventh day after creation. But there's two parts to this command. Some don't realize there are two parts to this command. There's the command to rest, and there's also what other command? You need to work. So does it make any sense to rest if you never work? You're always resting. So there's a command here. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. And then you can rest on that seventh. And look, even in paradise, Adam and Eve had to work, didn't they? The Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. Wow, you have to work even in paradise. And then Paul says in his letter to Thessalonians, if anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat. So there's work that precedes the rest. 6 days of work. You don't have to work every day. Just get everything done you need to so you can rest on that seventh day. Now we also have a repeat of this in the book of Deuteronomy. This is 40 years later. The people are getting ready. We're about 1 month from them crossing into Jordan. Moses is going to die here pretty soon. Those who had grumbled about going into the land are now dead. All we have left are Moses, and he's not going to be around that long. But then we have Joshua, and then we have Caleb, who's about 87 years old at this time. So he will be the oldest person then after Moses dies. And then here it is, the same thing, pretty much the same, observe the Sabbath day. There's one thing that's added here that is not in Exodus. He adds, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. Now that looks like a repeat. He's emphasizing this. He already has that your male, you shall not do any work, your male servant and your female servant, and that he emphasized here, you need to let your servants rest. Now notice here is the reason why, and see if there's any difference. You shall, nothing here about creating in 6 days and resting on the seventh. The reason here is different. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. So remember when you were in Egypt and Moses tried to get you that Sabbath day? He wouldn't give you one? Well, good news. I'm going to give you one now. You're going to get a Sabbath day when you get in that new land. So just quickly, here's the differences. Exodus, remember the Sabbath. And then the reason is because the Lord made heavens and earth on 6 days, and then he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed that day. And then in Deuteronomy, it's remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and you didn't get any time off. You were under those hard labors of your taskmaster and everything, and Moses tried to get you some time off, and then Pharaoh wouldn't give it to you. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. And Deuteronomy also adds that passage there about allowing your male and your female servants to rest, just like you're resting. Now, can you say, well, thank you, Lord, very much for offering me that Sabbath day. I really appreciate it, but I got a lot of work to do. Thanks, but no thanks. Was God good with that? And so we're in Exodus 31, 12 to 14, and the Lord said to Moses, you're about to speak to the people of Israel and say. So we always have here, Moses here is the intermediary between the Lord and the people. The people were scared, and they didn't even want to go around when the Lord is speaking. Above all, you shall keep my Sabbaths, for this is a sign between me and you throughout your generation. This is a sign. Remember, like the rainbow was a sign, circumcision was a sign. Keeping the Sabbath day is a sign for you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you. I set you apart. I make you holy. You shall keep the Sabbath because it is holy for you. That's the meaning of that word, sanctify. Everyone who profanes it shall be put to death. That's not a slap on the wrist, is it? So, Lord, how do we profane this? What do we do to profane it? I don't want to do that. I don't want to be put to death. And then he defines it. Whoever does any work on it, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. The soul, said, don't worry about the person that kills your body. Worry about the person that can get rid of your soul, and that's the Lord. But whoever does any work on it prompts the question, well, what's work? What's work? If I'm a carpenter, on the Sabbath, can I just go piddle around my garden? Does that work? If Tiger Woods plays golf, it's work. If Dick plays golf, is it work? No. It's play, right? So, all right. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is a day of solemn rest, holy to the Lord. So there's a lot of repetition here, and if something's repeated, it's important. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death. There it's repeated. Therefore the people of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout their generations as a covenant forever. Now what I found, what you find if you read the Bible, forever doesn't always mean forever. Always doesn't mean always. Where Luke says in the beginning of Luke, in my gospel, I told you everything that Jesus said and did.
Everything.
Well, we know he didn't do that. But we'll look at that. We'll look at one instance where forever wasn't forever. Death. Really? Just because I wanted to work on the Sabbath day? Imagine you coming into work on your day off. Are they going to fire you or kill you? They'll probably say, good work. Now, you may find this disturbing. While the people, we're going to go to the book of Numbers. While the people the people of Israel, they were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. And those who found him gathering sticks brought him to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation. They put him in custody because it had not been clear what should be done to him. Well, what was the penalty? Death. But he's just picking up sticks. Maybe he was cold. We don't know. It was not clear. But remember when Alex was teaching, Moses met with his father-in-law Jethro and says, what you're doing is too much work. So he appointed all these judges. So I imagine the judges probably had a first take on this. So well, we don't know. Moses said, we're going to pass it on. The buck stops with Moses. So they brought him to Moses. Moses didn't know what to do. Does picking up sticks, should we kill this man because he picked up sticks? And the Lord said to Moses, the man shall be put to death. So who's putting out the sentence? Not Moses, it's the Lord here. So the Lord is taking over. I can think of several other instances where Moses doesn't know what to say, so the Lord says what they are to do to the offender. The man shall be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp. And all the congregation brought him outside the camp and stoned him to death with stones as the Lord commanded Moses. And I'm sure there weren't 2 million people and they all threw stones, but the representatives, the one that serves as witness, remember, has to cast the first stone. So, what do I keep on doing wrong? All right. So, sound harsh? Yes. Yeah. That disturbed me a little. What if the poor man lost track of time? Have you ever lost track of what day it is, especially if you're retired? You say, why? Boy, did I miss the coffee with a note, or I forgot it was Thursday night, or something like that? What if it was unintentional? What if his wife was having a baby and the midwife asked him to boil some water? What happened? Well, let's look at the passage in context, and maybe this will not be as disturbing. Words have meaning in context. Passages have meaning in context. Let's look at context. Numbers, offerings for unintentional sins. So God realizes people will commit a sin unintentionally. They didn't mean to do it, and there is a remedy. You know, you accidentally kill a person, you go to one of the cities of refuge. So there's a remedy. Now, if you unintentionally fail to keep any of these commands that the Lord gave Moses, so the priest is going to make atonement for, if all of Israel, if the entire camp sins, then a priest can offer a sacrifice, and the whole Israelite community and the aliens living in them, they will be forgiven because it was unintentional. If just one person, that's what we have here, sins unintentionally, he'll bring a year-old female goat for a sin offering. The priest is to make atonement, and when atonement has been made, this person shall be forgiven. One and the same law applies to the one who sins unintentionally, whether he is a native-born Israelite or an alien. So aliens living among the people, foreigners, this also applied to them. However, if you were just a sojourner, just say passing through the land on your way to Egypt, it would not apply to you. But native-born Israelites and aliens, it applied to them if you sin unintentionally. Now let's look at a but. The but. But if anyone who sins defiantly, whether native-born or alien, that's the same as blaspheming the Lord. Anyone who sins defiantly, whether native-born or alien, blasphemes the Lord. And that person must be cut off from his people because he has despised the Lord's word and broken his commands. And that person must surely be cut off. His guilt remains on him. So if somebody does this, just to be defiantly, say that this man says, well, no one's telling me what I can do on the Sabbath. I'm going to go out and do it. Then you can't do that. That is the equivalent of blasphemy. What's the punishment for blasphemy? We know that from the New Testament. Stoning. And then right after this passage, right after someone sinning defiantly, that's when we have that passage. So here's the law. If you sin defiantly, you're blaspheming the Lord, you're going to be killed. And then we get an example of a person who sinned defiantly by going out. It seems small, but he defied the Lord. So keeping the Sabbath in the nation of Israel. We have a triangle, a covenantal triangle. Alex mentioned about a covenant in one of the lessons. And a covenant is an agreement between, two or more parties. You have a covenant. So if you live in a neighborhood where you have covenants, you have the HOA people, and then you have you're both parties to the covenant. So there are three parties here. Who is the first one? Who would you think is at the top of this covenant? Yeah, Yahweh, the Lord. Now, who else is a part of the covenant? The people? Israel? Third one might be a little more difficult. Who's the third part of the covenant? Or what's down there at the bottom? Crickets. The land of Canaan. Three parts. In ancient Near Eastern world, which is where Israel was, you needed three components in order to have a nation. You needed the people, well, that's obvious. You needed a God that the people worship and a way to worship the God. That's the laws and the covenants, the commandments. So you have the people, you have a God, and you needed land. Where are the people going to live? Where are they going to build their houses? Where are they going to get the raw resources to build their houses? Where are they going to raise their food? So you need people, you need God, and then you need the land. Without those three components, you couldn't have a nation. Some people well, we're going to do it without God. Doesn't work. So here's this covenantal triangle, and the bottom two was a covenant between God and Abraham. Israel, Lord speaking to Abram in Genesis 12, I will make of you a great nation, I will bless you and make your name great, and that you will be a blessing. So there's the covenant, God and Israel. And then the land, we go to chapter 13. The Lord said to Abram, lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are. Look north, south, east, and west. For all the land that you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. Now, we don't know, of course, there were time periods when they didn't have that land, when they were taken into captivity, and that was their own fault. They weren't obeying the rules that God had set forth for them to keep the land. So Exodus 6:6, say therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of Egyptians. This is before the Exodus. And I will deliver you from slavery to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great acts of judgment. So this is God saying what he's going to do, and this was the reason given in Deuteronomy for keeping the Sabbath, because I'm going to deliver you out of there. I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of the burdens of the Egyptians. So here's that covenant agreement between God and his people. I will bring you into the land that I swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. These are your forefathers, the patriarchs. I will give it to you for a possession. I am the Lord. Moses spoke thus to the people of Israel. Sounds like good news, doesn't it? But they did not listen to Moses. They don't even listen when they get good news, do they? Because of their broken spirit and harsh slavery. I will give it to you for a possession. So does that mean they owned the land? No. Did Adam and Eve own the Garden of Eden? Well, they couldn't have sold it to anyone, could they? The land shall be not sold in perpetuity. For who does the land belong to? The land is mine, and you, Israelites, and sojourners. You are strangers and sojourners with me. He's talking to the Israelites here. You're strangers and sojourners on my land. I'm letting you possess it, but it's my land. And in the country you possess, you shall allow a redemption of the land. 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yields, but the 7th year you shall let it rest and fallow. So with the people, they get a 7th day of rest. Of course, for the land, 1 day doesn't make much sense. So the land gets a growing year. The 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of the people may eat, and what they leave, the beasts of the field may eat. You shall do likewise and your vineyard and with your olive orchard. Now remember, on the 7th day they didn't collect any manna, but they still could eat. So the Lord is testing them here. He said, don't plant anything, don't sow anything on that 7th year. We're going to find out you can still eat. The Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you come into this land that you will get, that I will give you, as soon as your 40 years of wandering are over, the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. Now the land can't do it without your help. It can't keep you from sowing, but you're not supposed to sow. For 6 years you shall sow your field, and for 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather your fruits. But on the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest, a ceasing of work, a solemn rest for the land. So don't sow, don't do anything on that hard plant. A Sabbath to the Lord. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap what grows of itself in your harvest, or gather the grapes of your undressed vine. It shall be a year of solemn rest for the land. You know, how many times does God have to repeat himself? And they still don't listen. The Sabbath of the land, even if you don't plant on that seventh year, the Sabbath of the land shall still provide food for you, for yourself and for your male and your female slaves, and for your hired worker and the sojourner who lives with you, and for your cattle and for your wild animals, and for all that are in your land. All its yield shall be for food. Now that takes a lot of faith, doesn't it? To not sow anything, not to prune, not to do anything on that seventh year, and yet the land is still going to produce. It's going to lie fallow and yet still produce for you. But we know if they disobeyed the Sabbath day, death. What happens if they disobey here? Do you think they're going to disobey here? If you don't know Israel, right? But if in spite of all this you do not listen to me, and of course they don't, but walk contrary to me, then I will walk contrary to you in fury, and I myself will discipline you sevenfold. Onefold's bad enough, isn't it? Sevenfold for your sins. And I myself will devastate the land, this land that you love, that you think is yours in perpetuity, so that your enemies who settle in it shall be appalled at you. And I will scatter you among the nations. Of course he does. Scatter you, Assyria, Babylon. And I will unsheath the sword after you, and your land shall be a desolation, and your city shall be a waste. Then the land shall occupy its Sabbath as long as it lies desolate, while you are in your enemy's land. So if you're not going to do this, I'm going to send you off in captivity, and then your land can enjoy its Sabbath rest. Then the land shall rest and enjoy its Sabbath as long as it lies desolate, while you're in captivity, it shall have rest. The rest that it did not have on your Sabbath when you were dwelling in it. So I'm going to kick you out of the land. Then your land will have the Sabbath rest that you didn't give it while you were living there. So, what's going to happen? 70 years of Babylonian captivity. We're going to go to Jeremiah. This is Jeremiah's prophecy. If you remember, Jeremiah was not taken into Babylonian captivity along with Daniel and Ezekiel, but he remained in Jerusalem, and he was a prophet to the people there. He's saying this whole land, remember he's in Judea. This whole land shall become a ruin and a waste, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon for 70 years. Then after the 70 years are completed, I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, the land of the Chaldeans, for their iniquity, for their sins, declares the Lord, making the land an everlasting waste.
Is that like a desert?
Yes. Like a wilderness. Yes. Judah will become like a desert. Jeremiah's prophecy fulfilled in 2 Chronicles. King Nebuchadnezzar took into exile in Babylon those who had escaped from the sword. Some were killed, and they became servants to him and to his sons until the establishment of the kingdom of Persia. That happens at the beginning of the book of Ezra, and the king is Cyrus, who lets them go back to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths. All the days that it lay desolate, it kept Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. So because they weren't willing to keep Sabbath, so 70 years of Sabbaths, so they were gone 70 years. They were supposed to do one every 7 years. So that means 490 years they haven't allowed the land to have a Sabbath. So God's putting all these 70 together that they didn't do. So why keep the Sabbath? Well, it was commanded. That's a good reason. It was the fourth of the 10 Commandments. It was a sign from God, a sign between God and his people, so that they would know that he was the Lord their God. And that's from Ezekiel 20:20. God blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy, Exodus 20:11, so that's a good reason to keep it. Blessed is the person who keeps the Sabbath without desecrating it, so you'll be blessed. You'll be blessed by the Lord if you keep it. God himself set the precedent for it when he created all things that were created in 6 days, and then he rested on the seventh day. And it served as a reminder to the people, don't work so hard that you're not taking time off to refresh yourself. And we see an example of this with Jesus and his disciples. So let me turn around. This is cut off. This is after the apostles. Jesus sent out the 12 on a missionary journey 2 by 2. After they returned to Jesus, Jesus told them, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest for a while. A desolate place, remember, was a place where the ground had rest. So you come to a place where the ground has rest and rest for a while. For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in a boat to a desolate place by themselves. You remember a time when Jesus' mother Mary and his disciples came to him. They tried to have him come with them because they couldn't even eat because they were overwhelmed by people coming to be healed. So let's go to the New Testament, Jesus and the Sabbath. Here we have Sabbath mentions in the Bible here. And you see we have a lot of it here in Leviticus, obviously. And then Nehemiah. I think, why would Nehemiah have a lot of mentions? Remember, this is after they came back to the land. Nehemiah was the cupbearer to the king, and he was appointed governor. And he was upset. There were foreign people living in Jerusalem, and they were selling. Merchants were selling in the city on the Sabbath day. And he was upset about that. That was the reason for Nehemiah. And then it's in Ezekiel. Ezekiel was in captivity in Babylon, and he's teaching the people, about, hey, maybe if you hadn't violated the Sabbath so much, you wouldn't be here. And then, of course, in the New Testament, we have Sabbath. In the Gospels, Jesus was healing on the Sabbath, and then there was teaching on the Sabbath. And then, of course, in Acts, there's a lot of mentions of the Sabbath because Paul went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day to teach. So and then there's one or two mentions in Colossians and Hebrews. So let's look at one teaching here. Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath. On the Sabbath day, while he was going through the grain fields, his disciples plucked and ate some heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands. And some of the Pharisees said, why are you doing what is lawful to do on the Sabbath? So were they working here? They were just going through the field, plucking some of that. This is some of that grain along the side of the road, that you're not supposed to gather, so that they can glean it like Ruth did. But the Pharisees accused them of breaking the Sabbath just because they were walking through the fields. The Pharisees, I believe, had defined, what defines work? What is work? What can you not do on the Sabbath? And they came up with 39 reasons. Healing is not one of them. Healing is not prohibited, but we have reaping and threshing. Those were the two commandments they broke. They plucked grain. That's reaping. They rubbed it between their hands, and that's threshing. So they reaped and they threshed, and they violated the Sabbath. Then Luke 6:3, Jesus answered them, have you not read what David did when he was hungry? He and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and took and ate the bread of the Pharisees. That was when he was in Nob. Yep. Which is not lawful for any of the priests to eat. So he did something, David did something that wasn't lawful, just like they're accusing him. And he also David also gave his followers some to eat. And he said, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. He says, we're not doing anything more than what David did.
Is he not claiming authority?
Yeah, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. The man with the withered hand, he went on from there and entered a synagogue, and a man was there with a withered hand, and they asked him, is it lawful to heal on Sabbath? So they might accuse him. You know, they're not caring about people. They have no compassion that people are being healed. He said, which of you has a sheep, and if it falls in the pit on Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more value is a man than a sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Then he said to this man, stretch out your hand. And the man stretched it out, and it was restored, healthy like the other. So what did Jesus do? Did he make a poultice? Did he do something? Did he heal it? All Jesus did was speak, right? So all Jesus did was speak. So I guess God healed him. So I want to finish with this passage. I think this is a good passage to summarize the lesson here. This is found from Isaiah chapter 58, and I really like the reading of the New Living Translation on this. This is why I picked this. So we'll conclude with this passage here, this slide and the next slide. Keep the Sabbath day holy. Don't pursue your own interests on that day, but enjoy the Sabbath and speak of it with delight as the Lord's holy day. Honor the Sabbath in everything you do on that day, and don't follow your own desires or talk idly. Then the Lord will be your delight. I will give you great honor and satisfy you with inheritance I promised to your ancestor Jacob. I, the Lord, have spoken. So let it be written, so let it be done. Next week will be acceptable offerings. These are those offerings that Alex talked about, the guilt offering, the grain offering, all those offerings. So maybe even talk about tithes. Those are an offering, aren't they? So that is it. Completed before the second bill. Who gets this? Song leader.